Please welcome His Grace Ranjit Prabhu.
There are a few things that I can add, and that is that the BBT was established by Srila Prabhupada in 1972. I haven't heard that date yet. And whereas these various centers in ISKCON were established as independent, separate corporations, the BBT was always to be a very centralized operation, that it was very essential for that. And so it was already mentioned that the BBT formula for book production and sale was that temples would be charged double the printing cost in order that 50% of the income from the BBT would be dedicated to carrying on the printing of the books. It's a very intelligent business decision by Srila Prabhupada, very early in the beginning. And the other 50% for the establishment of and construction of temples. So, the BBT International was established in 1988 in order to protect the copyrights of Srila Prabhupada's books. Srila Prabhupada's books were registered, their copyrights were registered legally in the United States practically as soon as they were printed and published. And these copyrights will last 75 years. Now, it's very important that we understand what copyright law is, and that we exercise these copyrights on Srila Prabhupada's behalf. Srila Prabhupada certainly understood what copyrights were, and they protect the BBT from piracy, and they protect the artwork as well. And the funding system that Srila Prabhupada set up enabled the BBT eventually to start funding other projects. The first project that Srila Prabhupada insisted that the BBT fund was the Bhaktivedanta Institute. The Bhaktivedanta Institute is a group of scientists that have become devotees and who understand the Vedic perspective of science. The Bhaktivedanta Institute produces scientific papers on various subjects and hosts conferences on science and spirituality. This project was so dear to Srila Prabhupada that despite his almost ironclad decision that no funds from the BBT ever be spent for any other purpose than printing books, still he insisted that the BBT fund the Bhaktivedanta Institute. It's just a sign of his incredible insight into the modern age. His very first book that he published, The Easy Journey to Other Planets, is a scientific exploration. It's the beginning of his analysis of spirit and matter, presented to the world at large. So Srila Prabhupada was very modern, and this adaptation of the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita to the scientific mind is especially noteworthy. One other noteworthy thing that probably was not mentioned earlier was Srila Prabhupada's insistence that he would challenge the philosophies of the world. Now, when you consider that time is the most valuable thing that we have as human beings, to waste time, you cannot recall 1 second of time, no matter how much you invest, no matter how much you wish to. And yet, Srila Prabhupada spent many hours with his devotees discussing the various philosophies of the world. He insisted that books be printed on philosophy, and I personally had the privilege to proofread the transcriptions of Srila Prabhupada's tapes of these scientific philosophical conversations, and he began with the Western philosophers, with the Greeks, Plato, Aristotle, right through to the modern time, to such modern philosophers as Jean-Paul Sartre and so on. So Srila Prabhupada had these conversations transcribed, and they were eventually published after his passing, and in his book Spiritual Dialectics. And another important project that is funded by the BBT is the Bhaktivedanta Archives. I was very fortunate to be engaged at the Bhaktivedanta Archives for 22 years, and engaged in proofreading, publishing, and so on, because it became very apparent very quickly that unless steps were taken, Srila Prabhupada's legacy would be dispersed and lost. I'll give you one example. I had to, one of the tapes, videotapes, there were, in that era, there were what were called 2-inch videotapes. You know, now everything is digital, everything is on little discs and on hard drives. But in those days, super high quality video came in 2-inch tapes, this thick. And so I wanted to examine these because we wanted to remaster some of the tapes. So I went to get these, and what had happened was that there was a defect in these tapes, that after a while they started melting and gummed up these tapes. So I then decided, well, let me look at the original film that Yadubar has stashed away in the cupboards of the archives. So I went into the cupboards, started to take out the cans, and I opened the cans and started looking at the film, and I discovered that this was around 1990, that the films were turning blue because of the chemical composition of the emulsions that go to make up film. These film strips were starting to turn blue. And so immediately I informed Yadubar, and we made a presentation to the BBT trustees. And over the next 2 years, due to a BBT grant of $125,000, these films were transferred digitally, and they are now the basis of those wonderful DVD collections that have been compiled by ITV and ISKCON Cinema. So this is an idea of some of the work that we've done at the archives. We've also, just to list what is in the Bhaktivedanta archives, because I think it's important to know that there are over 18,000 color slides of Srila Prabhupada. There are 10,000 plus black and white negatives of Srila Prabhupada. There are 120,000 plus color slides of ISKCON activities from the 60s through to 1985. And at some point we decided at the Bhaktivedanta archives that we could not actually branch out, because the volume of ISKCON and its activities is so enormous that we had to focus and concentrate purely on Srila Prabhupada and his message and his paraphernalia, in order to because we simply don't have the facilities to create an ISKCON archive, which would be extensive. So as I said, and there are approximately 50 hours of film and video of Srila Prabhupada. Now all these images have been scanned at high resolution, and the wonderful thing about digital technology is that there is no loss or diminution in the quality of the image once you have it digitized. Now Srila Prabhupada once said that this movement will continue for 10,000 years. Now we don't know of any empire that's existed for longer than about 300 or 400 years, and what to speak of 10,000. So it is important that this digital approach be preserved and maintained for as long as possible, or at least until the end of civilization as we know it, as they say. And so this is the purpose of the Bhaktivedanta archives, that those things like the Bhaktivedanta database, was an incredible endeavor to create the Bhaktivedanta database. And we've always at Bhaktivedanta archives used what's called off-the-shelf technology. Because we know, for example, CDs, DVDs, gradually they become obsolete. So we try to focus on that technology that will last, that will stay the course. And at present, the technology the technology of choice is everything is backed up onto hard drives with copies kept. And so that's the current state of affairs. Now, as I said, the major function of the archives is to keep up with the technology, but there are personal papers of Srila Prabhupada, his manuscripts, many of which he wrote by hand, some of which he typed himself, and these have been preserved by putting them through a process of de-acidification. And some of these are very amazing historical documents, because in Calcutta, when Srila Prabhupada was first printing his books, he would use spare paper. And what was happening in Calcutta at the time was that the Russian communists were very influential. And so they were printing various kinds of newspapers and flyers. And Srila Prabhupada they were only using one side. And so Prabhupada would write do his typing on the other side. And when you go to the archives and you can see the opposite side, you'll see this Russian propaganda of how Sputnik was developed and how Sputnik is flying around space due to the glories, of the great Soviet socialist republics. And so it's a very real proof of Srila Prabhupada's person and personality. And this is also very, very important. One of the top professors in the United States, he said that we know more about Srila Prabhupada than we know about Lord Chaitanya. We know much more about Srila Prabhupada than we know about Jesus. It's a very unique, Krishna has made a very unique arrangement for Srila Prabhupada. And it is our duty and our hope that this can be preserved for humanity for the millennia to come. And we hope that this golden age, which actually the calculation was that the Battle of Kurukshetra took place in 3,200, and if you add 5,000 years, then you come to 1896, which is the same year of the birth of Srila Prabhupada and the decision of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur to send his first book, one of his first books in English, to the universities and the intellectuals of the world. So this is just, and Srila Prabhupada found significance in this connection, and he mentions it. And just on a personal note, this is more or less my presentation about the archives, but on a personal note, I do a little bit feel like the prodigal son, having been away from the place of my birth for most of my life, but it's good to be back, and it's wonderful to see the development of Krishna consciousness. I came back to South Africa in 1976 after being recruited by Rochini, who was mentioned here. Actually, Gokulendra and I joined at the same time, so I feel left out, in this presentation. But But it's really amazing. And Krishna has taken me on a fantastic journey this life. I joined the Hare Krishna movement at the ISKCON temple in Vancouver in 1974. And it's been a wonderful trip. And I do thank you for your attention, and I do thank you for your hospitality. The devotees at the Durban temple have been wonderful. And so I wish you all success, and I look forward to coming here next year. We're scheduled to have the international BBT meetings here in Durban next year, and so I look forward to seeing you then again. Thank you very much.